For our final session, I'm pleased to introduce our session leaders, Sonya Lee and Francesca Albrezzi. Sonya is Professor of Art History, East Asian Languages and Cultures, and Religion at USC. Francesca is a digital research consultant in Office of Advanced Research Computing lecturer for the program in Digital Humanities at UCLA, and they're here to introduce our two speakers.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very pleased to be part of this final session. And we have two speakers in this part of the program. So in person is Cindy Nguyen, who's an assistant professor in the Department of Information Studies and Digital Humanities program at UCLA. She specializes in the history of Southeast Asian print culture, digital humanities, and libraries. And on the screen somewhere, oh, here, okay. It's Tom Chandler, who's associate professor of human-centered computing at Monash University in Australia. That's where he's joining us from there. His research explores 3D modeling and virtual environments in research visualization. So please join me in welcoming both of them.
Firstly, thank you all for staying for the last presentation. And thank you spectacularly for the organizers. I know that there's going to be closing remarks, but can we give a mini round of applause for the organizers? It has been quite a winding dream for Tom and I to get the chance to present together, both on time zones and also just where we are in the world. So I think it's really exciting to finally get this chance. When we had come together to envision something to present, we actually wanted to do it like a workshop, a guided workshop that was embodied, and you would actually carry through with the pedagogical experience of what it means to both teach and learn with Virtual Angkor. Today we'll get a bit of a taste of that, and I do encourage you to stay for the demos because you also I will facilitate some of that experience as well, so you can see how this might be modeled in the classroom and just have fun with it as well. What's exciting about today too is that it's been a culmination because I also have been learning so much through this symposium. I'm excited to learn finally from Tom too, to just get the last updates on the perspectives on the design and future of Virtual Angkor. Today's presentation, how we decided to organize it, is quite flipped and non-traditional, especially in this space that's focused a lot on digital humanities making and creation, because we're flipping it a little bit. We actually are focused, I've been part of Virtual Angkor, focused primarily on critical pedagogical approaches, so much more from the public dissemination, UI UX side. How does this look like in the classroom, in the community? What is the ongoing afterlife of a digital project that is ongoing? So we're actually going to start with the teaching, what it means to teach with this resource, and embed that within the underlying humanistic why. And then I'll pass over to Tom to talk about the design. So a bit about me, because I'm coming to this project slightly differently. I'm trained as a historian. I'm not trained as a historian necessarily of medieval Cambodia. I'm trained as a historian of 19th and 20th century Vietnam. Of course, the context of Southeast Asia, analysis of print culture and heritage, writ large. But for me, I approach both history within modes of narrative. So I look at this assemblage of history, film, storytelling, oral narratives, and immersive technologies, all as puzzle pieces of a similar conversation. What's exciting for me as with digital humanities is the transparency of labor and collaboration that is necessary for epic projects to exist. So for me, a lot of my classes, when I teach digital humanities classes, is focused on digital humanities project management, on sustaining relationships, on building short-term and long-term goals, facilitating play and learning through as researchers or as invested principal investigators within a certain project, and how to treat that in a sustainable, ethical way. So that's how I think of my relationship to digital humanities. So this is just kind of an assemblage of different things that I've been a part of, including I'm also a filmmaker. I think a lot about kind of narrative and audience and storytelling and the why, the affective, the emotional, to kind of pull out and kind of motivate and ground the labor that's involved in this type of work. So just a kind of a little teaser of other elements of my work. So this is one such example. At some point, I'd love to get this into shape to present this project more formally, but this is my deconstruction of a woodblock printed, pretty recent in cultural heritage terms, 19th and 20th century. So it's printed in 1908, Visual Encyclopedia of Vietnamese Material Life. And for me, like I deconstructed it, I want to explore it in these 700 pages in virtual reality. And then I was like, well, this is completely overwhelming. Why would I read a book this way to have it surrounded me? And I wanted to see patterns. So then I kind of approached it to with visualization approaches. So then here are some network graphs of me moving and finding kind of relationships between the different representations through the accompanying captions. And this is one such that's tracing specifically a narrative, what I see as a narrative, but really are relationships between different representations around childbirth. So these are massage, midwife giving a massage, for a woman about to give birth, a nursemaid. And for me, like, this is the stitching together of a encyclopedic representation of knowledge through narrative. It's making visible the connections that I, as a reader, am making on a large data source, which is 700 pages of 4,000 images. So that's kind of just a teaser of maybe my future of what's to come in terms of the different work I do, in this case for Vietnam. And we kind of alluded to this, but digital humanities projects are often one of the many, many things that one is doing. So this was just kind of a funny screenshot of like, oh, I guess these are kind of the different things I'm working on. So I have, so that visual representation is part of this Speaking Gender and Tradition project, where I'm trying to take this source and then kind of fork it into many different layers to think about text reuse, both from a historical object into tracing orality, which is my dream project, which is like, how do you trace orality and trace text reuse through sayings and kind of the different ways in which one repeats different types of sayings across generations. So it's a very aspirational project that I'm kind of very early in the stages of. My first book is on libraries, that's bibliotactics. And today it's about slow world building, which is really a pedagogy-informed research or a pedagogy-informed project thinking about radical reimagination. And that's how I come to Virtual Angkor. So let's see, that was the speed through of all my random stuff. Okay, so I've been reflecting on how it is that all my projects come together, from Vietnamese history to transmedia work to filmmaking and to learning, collaborative learning. And for me, like, world building is a very kind of, I realized maybe I should shrink this. There we go. World building kind of invites in the digital, the virtual, the making, the design into the human elements of why we do this. And for me, world building invites a critique and reimagination of social worlds. Specifically, I take a slow world building approach to take time to wander, wonder, pause, and be really embedded. And these are just all kind of key humanistic historical practices on what one does with different types of sources, be it visual, archival, textual, 3D models. And actually, the slowness is key because it also pays attention to labor. All of this takes a long time to produce, to make sense of, to understand, to disseminate, to clean, to prepare, and all of that. And I've been thinking about this, and I wrote a little bit about this actually on my website on slowness as a kind of a world-building provocation that brings together teaching and research. And I've been just drawing kind of this guiding principle when I think of digital humanities design, particularly for my intro classes. We were like, yeah, we can do this and this. And I was like, yes, but is that substantive? Or are we actually getting towards something? Or are we adding more? And that's part of my kind of design principles for like when I'm guiding students in design, in creating a project, just to kind of be kind of the kind of scoping down like the feature creep of design. And then the other kind of slowness that I invite into both, it's all aspects of my work from digital humanities to teaching and research is slowness invites in this possibility of nonlinearity for collaborative meaning making and for us to pause and be curious, both as creators and as like learners and recipients of whatever project we're working on. So I'm actually just going to jump into Virtual Angkor as kind of a way to model the slowness. So I came into like working with the Virtual Angkor team pretty later in their stage, and Tom could speak to the fuller journey. And I came to it because I saw I won the Digital Humanities World Voice and Swag Prize. I was like, well, there's something that exists for Southeast Asia. That's so exciting. It's highly, highly unrepresented in terms of cultural heritage and digital humanities. I've got to teach with this. Like, I want to engage with it. So for me, I was like, well, but how do I work with this? I work on 19th and 20th century Vietnam specifically, but colonialism. So what we did was I opened up a larger kind of teaching approach, and I've taught it now in a variety of classes, from a 19th and 20th century Southeast Asia class, from a Global Asias seminar. I've taught versions of this to K through 16, but mainly K through 12 educators to teach in the classroom, to thinking about global modernisms and global urbanism specifically. So I tried to create and design this module in a way that could be flexible. And I just raised a pretty kind of simple question in a way of, what does it mean to tour the past? Like, I think that was a very relatable question for kind of a 2024 audience. And I build it off of like my training as a historian to look at primary sources. So we then trace and follow along with the different primary sources. We look at, because I taught it, for example, in the 19th, 20th century class, we looked at colonial travel logs. So we looked at French representations of Angkor. And then we looked at Cambodian representations of Angkor of the same period. We also looked at earlier representations. And I won't go into full detail, but so I have this is all, I think the URL goes to the full teaching module, which is available online, which goes through the guiding questions, the pre-reading, the different worksheets and things like that, how long it takes, like how this might be implemented within the classroom. And specifically, we kind of bring students into the primary source engagement to thinking about representation and representation of the past specifically. One of the exciting things I just wanted to flag is, like, when I guide the students in this pre-prep for the class, I also kind of verbally add some cues of like what to ask. And then after I do that, I pass the cue making to the student that had the virtual experience so they can do the cue making so then it becomes like an effect of passing on the pedagogy. And I usually have, this might come in Q&A more, but I have these guide prompts. I'll just read them really quickly. I just ask, what do you see? What do you hear? What makes you say that? What do you want to know more? That's all the questions that I really teach the students to ask. And then we have kind of breakout discussions with that. Just because I want to go aware of somewhat time. So we'll do this like super hyper fast, but imagine you're an undergraduate student with minimal knowledge of Southeast Asian history. You kind of did the readings. And then I had, you looked at their readings assigned. And then we'll do a really quick discussion on what does it mean? How do you even reconstruct the past, especially the past with limited sources? So then we'll discuss through the different types of what type, almost like a detective, if we had to understand how people ate or where they lived or what kind of the temperature, what was the cityscape, what would you rely upon? And then I go through these different types of historical sources of which Virtual Angkor the reconstruction was built out of. And then we also talked about some other sources. And this is, really clearly pulled from virtualangkor.com sources. So I'm just really describing the tremendous work that Tom and the team has been doing for many years. So I'm just gonna play some of this so that we can hear and kind of embody ourselves in the experience of learning this. I might, for purpose of time, forward a little bit some of the historical background. Whoops. Maybe I have to. Okay. I might just, maybe here.
Angkor Wat also became known as a Buddhist temple. By building...
Oh, I'm sorry. Is it too loud? Is it okay? The popping? It's okay. And then I invite you to, when you're watching this and listening, to jot down any impressions regarding objects or sounds or people, textures, mood. That's what students would be doing in this experience.
In more and more extensive and elaborate temple and city complexes, power would be accumulated by the Khmer king and would reinforce their divine kingship. Yet, as Jadokwan's records point to, Angkor was not only a temple but was a living city. In this activity, we will explore the virtual reality reconstruction of Angkor in the 12th and 13th century. This map shows the extensive expanse of the urban metropolis, which at its peak hosted over 750,000 individuals. In this activity, imagine yourself as a visitor to Angkor, just like Jadokwan. What do you see? What do you hear? What makes you curious? Explore 13th century Angkor. Do Jadokwan's words resonate with what you see? How does this compare to other visions of what we think of when we think of Angkor?
So I'm going to now, so this is just an expanded experience. I invite you to go to virtualangkor.com. All these teaching modules are available. And like mine is like a very specific one for 19th, 20th century, but there's ones focused on themes of like trade and commerce, power and place, water and climate. And with that, I wanted to pass it over to Tom. Okay.
Great. Thanks so much, Cindy. That was great. I guess I got to update some of those scenes that we've got on the site. Some of them are embarrassingly from maybe 6 or 7 years ago. So I just quickly wanted to thank all the organizers for arranging, especially for this time here. This is really great. This is like 8 a.m. I've been glad to overlap with LA just a little bit. And yes, thanks also Cindy for suggesting this. Cindy and I have been trying to get a presentation together for about 4 years. So yeah, this is really good to present. Can everyone hear me okay? Done that? Yep. Okay, so I just want to make sure I do everything right here because I wanted to quickly jump through some slides. Now, I'm just going to share screen. Actually, let me stop. I've got to share screen, make sure I'm sharing sound, optimize for video, share. Okay, so I'm going to flick through these slides really quickly, I'm afraid. I'm notorious for doing this. I have, sometimes I've had presentations with 90 or 150 slides and I just keep flicking through them. But they're all visual, there's not much text. Just to continue from Cindy's presentation, I won't show Virtual Angkor, but I'm just going to quickly show some of the, I guess the project behind it, which isn't really the website, it isn't really virtual reality, it's a really large scale model of the city of Angkor. It's certainly a slow project. It's a very long project. It was my PhD, and I'm still going with it. I do other things, but I keep coming back to this. So a quick overview, I guess, in this slide here, you can see, here's our model of Angkor Wat. You can see that that's based on an archaeological map, and I rely a lot on my archaeologist friends over the last 15 years to feed me all the information. There was a big Australian archaeological initiative at Angkor for some years. So this is a GIS, a Geographic Information Systems map, and this is really important to what I'll show to the sonic map. You see, we build our reconstructions on these, and then we can go inside the reconstructions. So here's all the aspects that the Virtual Angkor project encompasses. I'm just going to look at a few quickly today. Modeling temples, modeling or even scanning temples. I mean, this is pretty de rigueur for a lot of digital humanities and virtual heritage studies. And we use things like, we're using a LiDAR point scan of Angkor that was done in 2013. So a scan of the whole site. But really, my background's in archaeology and fine arts, but quite a while ago, I got into 3D and 3D animation. That's what I teach here, 3D animation and games. So I'm kind of coming in the opposite direction to a lot of digital humanities scholars where they're leaning into information technology, and I'm in that area. I'm coming from archaeology, but I'm in information technology. So really, when we're talking about anime, we're also talking about sculpting, making things, and you can see we're in the tradition of just how like sculptors at Angkor work. But the ultimate goal of this is to put together people and animals and landscapes, which is hard to do. But once you've got it, once you've made an elephant and some soldiers, you have the makings of an army. Back to maps, and I'm sorry to be breathless. I just want to get through this so I don't run out of time. But this is what we're really, this is the scale of Angkor. So you can see we're 1,000 square kilometers here. And this is this central area. We're really interested in the time of 1300, which is just about when Angkor's it's at its apex and also beginning its decline. Really interesting time. These maps that we're bringing in, so these were supplied by Damien Evans, a good friend of mine, a very famous archaeologist who sadly passed away last year. But these maps that he worked on, and there's probably 30 years of mapping expertise here. But I just want to draw your attention to this because this comes up in the sonic map. So the GIS maps of Angkor, the archaeological maps, they're divided into these different categories. And this is a mound. This means it's a raised area, perhaps a meter or so above the ground. It's usually perhaps a road, perhaps somewhere under a house. I'm really interested in marrying up or going between what is a map and what does it look like on the ground. So as Cindy sort of showed you some of these animations, but these are the people walking along the roads. And you can see some of these roads here. So the same thing with water. There's a water layer in these maps. Angkor's a hydraulic city. These are all canals and all these are tiny little ponds. But what was it like to move along these? I'm really interested in, if we could go inside the map. I'm very interested in that. It's not an easy thing to do. I'm still working on it. Then there's all these fields. The edges of rice fields leave a very consistent archaeological imprint. Angkor is a wonderful city to work on because nothing was ever built on top of it. Once it was abandoned, it's kind of preserved. So I have friends who've been studying rice fields, but I'm also really interested in what these look like on the ground if we were to generate the whole city. So very quickly, there's a lot of lacunas and gaps in the modern record of Angkor. When we're mapping things, it's very fragmentary. We do a lot of things like vegetation modeling. A lot of these things are quite consistent. And if I can show you this very quickly, I'm going to, this really should, I guess it will contextualize what you're going to see in the sonic map. This is the LiDAR scan of Angkor. So this is done by helicopter, and it's kind of a laser scan of the whole archaeological park. And what's really interesting here is you can go over areas that you can see here, this is an airport. There's the airport there. So it's a mixture of an archaeological landscape and a modern landscape. The map that we put over this is only the ancient city of Angkor. It's an archaeological map. It only maps things that were there many centuries ago. So it's not the modern map, but it's kind of underneath the modern, this LiDAR scan. This is, I guess, underneath, but it's more of an information layer. And then what we've been working on, we're still not done yet, is trying to turn that into a virtual world. So this is the virtual world built on the map, built on the GIS map, and underneath that is the LiDAR map. So we can swap between them and perhaps even get down to the ground almost anywhere. But how detailed it is on the ground, that's something we're still working on. So if I go, and how am I doing for time? Have I got a few minutes or am I running out of time? I'm sorry. Could someone say?
3 or 4 minutes.
Got it. That's good. Thank you. Okay, so just to remind everyone that a lot of these, we've got to reconstruct. This is the state of a lot of these temples in the map. They're just really piles of rubble, but some of them are still very intact. The project that I'm going to show you in a minute, and I'll probably just do a quick preview and then I'll wrap up. It wouldn't have happened without the collaboration of an ethnomusicologist I met at Angkor 6 or 7 years ago, called Patrick Casal. And interestingly, he was working in parallel with us. He's investigating the sounds of Angkor. We do the visualization of Angkor. He's really interested in the sounds and the orchestras of medieval Angkor. So his site, Sounds of Angkor, details all the wonderful work he's done over more than a decade. You can see that Patrick's been isolating instruments in the bas-reliefs and then reconstructing them in 3D. So he goes and gets them built, and then he trains musicians to play them in orchestras. So this is a wonderful project. I would say that Patrick's much more 3D than us, because he finds these instruments and then goes and gets them made in places like with bronze casters in Nepal, literally recreates them. We only digitally do that. Okay, so I think I will wrap that up. And what I'm going to do now, this might take just a minute to load, but hopefully the sound will come through. Cindy has this demo. And it's an outcome of our project. We didn't expect this to happen, but once Patrick supplied us with all his sounds and also with the few live recordings I've done at Angkor, we thought we'd put the two together in a sonic map. Now, this is ready-made for virtual reality. You can put a headset on and go through this. But we're going to play it on the desktop, which in a way is better because it's more extensive.
I figured we could have it on the Quest and on the desktop.
Yep.
It'll be available on, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so okay.
What we're showing now is just this revealing of these layers, of the archaeological layers. And then a soundscape beyond that. So you've got to imagine you're kind of walking through this. If you put the headset on to the sides of Godzilla, you're a huge, you're towering over this, like a little tiny little models, but here we are on the desktop, we can zoom around it. Okay, I'm gonna drive it, so this is dynamic, I'm not playing a video. The closer you get to the ground, the more sounds you'll hear, but they're scattered all over the map. So you hear horns, these are coming from the temple from 3D. These are all the people. They're little squares because it's very to run this with the implication of the cloud moving around in the city. So if we move up, I'm going to take you over to Angkor Wat, where the sound might be quite deafening. We'll approach it over the moat. As we go over, hear sounds of daily life. These are mostly my field recordings from Africa. Approaching Angkor Wat. last Angkor flat. You can see the ghost of the houses we have in the model. It's not accurately placed, it's generated, but the temples aren't fully placed. We'll move over to another area and we'll try to finish up. So I guess if we move up, you can see how huge our map is. Really big. It does run out after a while, but I'll just get down below here and we'll approach. We're going over a very densely inhabited area here. Sometimes the sounds repeat, but mostly they're random. I think we have about 60 or 70 sounds here, all mixed together. We'll just approach some of these temples here. This top one. A lot of chicken, a lot of roasted. And I think I will stop there. I'm going to stop the share there. And I hope I've kept to time. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, great. Since we started with Cindy's presentation on pedagogy, so I will just start. I'm a art historian by training, and I do teach on Angkor in my class. Actually, currently I'm teaching Introduction to Asian Art, and later in the semester I will actually have a lecture on this very subject. And so when I was invited to comment, ask intelligent questions about this presentation, it really got me to think about in what ways digital humanities project like this can actually facilitate my job as an educator. And after I checked out virtualangkor.com and saw some of the teaching models and some of these amazing digital history images and videos, it really got me to think about the material from the student's perspective, because most of the students we have these days grew up using devices. They experience history learnings through screens, not like going to a museum. Most of them actually never been to a museum before. And so I was just thinking, maybe if I can just tell you, usually when I start teaching on Angkor, I have assigned readings. I get them to learn about the culture. And then in my PowerPoint lecture, I will explain all of this, and then I will zero in on some of the key temples. Mm-hmm. And after learning more about this project through Cindy and Tom, I realized I should totally reverse it. Mm-hmm. I will actually go to this site and show them some of the clips to show them people walking in the marketplace or people approaching Angkor on the causeway. Mm-hmm. Because I feel that actually is a very quick way to hook the student with the subject. And once they get that exposure, then they can start doing the readings. Mm-hmm. I think that will actually make them actually do the readings. Because most of them do not do the readings, just to be very honest. Mm-hmm. And but I think after seeing this, they actually will get very curious. Mm-hmm. And I think that's actually a really great way. And it also corresponds to what the team says on the site, that it's actually meant to be the starting point for further exploration. So I'm just maybe perhaps turn to Francesca and also to Cindy for more thoughts on how to really make use of these sites. I know you approach it from a very different perspective, but because this project is designed with archaeologists and with you as a historian of 19th, 20th century Southeast Asian history, I'm an art historian, so I look at it very differently. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of interesting because in art history, we tend to focus on the exceptional and extraordinary. So we always zero in on the temples.
Yeah.
And in this site, you don't
Yeah.
really get the recreation of temples, but you see everything in between.
Mhm.
So I'm just curious how you two might respond to, now that you know art historians are actually using this. So how would you make or adjust the material? I imagine it's an ongoing project. You are open to maybe adding more things to like new audiences.
Should I take that first, or Tom, do you want to take it, or me?
Please,
Okay.
please, Cindy.
I mean, when I first stumbled upon Virtual Angkor, what was most exciting for me was the social aspects of it. Like, Angkor as a living city. And I think, and it's not just, I mean, I would say I work on a modern period, it's like 19th and 20th, and it's very, for some students, it feels so distant and so far and kind of unrelated, like in terms of everyday life. And when students are thinking of the past, there's like this disconnect that happens that anything 20 years ago like didn't exist somehow. Like there's like this romanticization or distancing from the past, like the people they did, and then there's almost like a looking towards the past and looking towards the future in a very kind of abstracted way. And I see that because I'm a colonial historian, so I'm seeing the ways in which colonial representations of Angkor were then like politicized, both to justify French conquest and continual exploitation and extraction of Cambodia, but also how it became kind of part of a nation state building project. So there's like all these political implications of how groups of individuals deploy the past as a distant, dead thing. So like for me, the political and truly like deeply historical interventions of Virtual Angkor is really profound. Both for someone who studies the 19th, 20th century, for someone that just studies more contemporary practices as well, and I think for representing and diversifying the ways in which we think of cities, right? Like cities are not just the buildings and the infrastructure, it is the people that live and make the infrastructure and carry on kind of these different types of social practices. So that's like my excitement about kind of centering the social that is so profound as an intervention for Virtual Angkor. And then I would just add one thing about pedagogy. I've flipped it in different ways. Like the module that I have is a very kind of source criticism, like a historical, like training future historians approach. But I think there is something about building that connection and excitement that is so, I mean, we mentioned in the previous presentation too, like with young people, like they are immediately there and they can then connect. And I would just like kind of like end with like a few notes from my students from like when they themselves experienced it. Like students would note, animals, quietness. It was just lovely to hear what they observed. And they practice the art of observing and listening and responding and commenting in a different way than like analysis or summary. And I think and this is like the task of object observation, or just like, I mean, this is all art history too, like visual observation is so key. And when it's implemented with sound, but I think like students then started to characterize it. They're like idleness. One student also noted, and I don't know if I told you, Tom, this, the shifting of the umbrella, because they noticed like the humanness of how heavy an umbrella might feel when you're holding it. It's not, so like that shifting, they're like, oh, these are humans who are tasked with holding an umbrella for hours, how hot it must be. There was, like students brought this up. I didn't even observe that. So it was so profound to see students kind of humanizing history and the labor of these individuals of the past in that really profound way.
Yep. Would you like me to add to that?
Yes. I
Yeah,
would like
to. Thanks, Cindy. I guess, just picking up on the whole thing about a living city, what always annoyed me, going to Cambodia so many times, it's also, I should add, for Australians, Cambodia's like Guatemala or something for us. It's quite close for us to get to. There's a kind of different dynamic of relations between Australia and Cambodia, which are very friendly. We have a big Khmer community here in Melbourne too. But getting back to this, what it is to think about Angkor, what annoyed me with all the tourist literature, and also in how it was taught in high schools, and it was just all pictures of a dead city and ruins. It was like a relic, black and white photos of broken things, temples. I mean, all that's fine, but I was very interested in a living city. What it would be like to reconstruct it as a vibrant, bustling, living place. I guess archaeologists are always obsessed with how it collapsed. I don't care at all how it collapsed. I'm going to stay firmly in that little window of when it was at its apex, I guess, as I said, just before it started heading downhill. But I think that's really interesting for us today, even with just modern urbanism. How do we know that we're at a tipping point? We never know that. We never know that until much later. So it's it's fascinating to try and get this city going like that. I guess the project historically, when it began, I was mostly working with archaeologists, and it was really an exercise in archaeological visualization, but then working with Adam Ulo at Texas, who used to be at Monash, and then with Cindy, and also with Bernard. I'm starting to work much more with historians, which I think is that's kind of recent, and it was always going to have that, but I think that I'm kind of more comfortable with it as a kind of a virtual history thing. It used to be archaeological basis, but it's kind of a virtual history project now, but it's very much about space and place, and it's very much about, for if we're going to visualize anything in how I see it, it's first about trying to model the space. And I guess that I wouldn't say that because I'm a 3D modeler, so I'm quite obsessed with these things. I think you can learn new things by modeling stuff. And I guess most people do begin in virtual heritage. They do begin with temples and buildings, but I think if you start with the people, it's a totally different way to build it. If you can animate the people, if you can think about what the people would look like, they're always missing from a lot of these applications because they're hard to do. It's really hard to do these animated people. And I'm indebted to all my animators who built this, especially Chandara Ang, who was one of my early students, Cambodian Australian, who animated most of this. So animating the people is really important. And then other things like, I guess, today's students, I think talking about 3D models of people and what it is to hypothesize a medieval city, students today, I think they're very comfortable with seeing animated people. They know it's a hypothesis. They're comfortable with it through games. So I would just, the way that we've done it, if you look at Virtual Angkor, everyone, you know immediately it's all computer generated. I never wanted to make it look too real. It's very hard to do, but it's hypothetical and it evolves slowly. So it's never finished. We'll come back and add more things and add more things and add more things. And I guess where I'd like to finish that is that 3D models of people are just like 3D models of architecture. They're hypotheticals, even though they seem to behave like real people. Yeah.
Are we doing okay on time? I just want to do a quick time check. Okay. So I absolutely love this project. I have pages and pages of notes of questions for both of you, but I wrote things down to try to keep myself to task and knowing that we're at the end of the day. But building off of what this discussion was just sort of touching on, I noticed in the pre-circulated
No, it's a Zoom auto thing. No, nothing to do with.
Okay. In the pre-circulated materials and the article that was in there, you discussed how the project draws upon, quote, older traditions of imaging or imagining and imaging past places, such as the modeled dioramas popular in the 20th museum displays. And many museums today have moved away from diorama displays or in situ installations to take a different approach to contextualizing ethnographic fragments that don't risk the objectification of people or cultures, but that is not what's happening in this like virtual diorama that we're experiencing, right? It's very clear that the goals of these projects is to really bring as much humanity as possible to the understandings of Angkor's histories. And so I was just wondering, can you walk us through, Tom, some of the technical and design discussions? You were just sort of alluding to some of these, but that you had around the sort of ethics of historical reanimation or reimaging, and some key decisions that the team made along the way that you think really shaped the direction of the project. And also, Cindy, how did you sort of navigate similar discussions with your students as you taught the project?
Sure. Do you want me to go first, Cindy?
Yeah, Tom. Yeah.
Yep. I guess, yeah, first to your question of dioramas and how museums are moving away from that. That's true. I think, and it's because I think that they're frozen moments in time, really. But I guess I'm drawing on that tradition of what it is to even model a frozen moment in time, because you kind of have to do that first before you animate it. So, I guess if you thought about the whole, what we've got is we've got a model of the city of Angkor, but then in that city, you've got all the little tiny people that are placed around it, and then all the little elephants and the houses and the trees and all the things. But then it's different. It becomes a different kind of thing, because then they start moving, and with the people, you can give them. It's really fascinating. If these virtual people, if they inhabit the map, you can give them some goals and directions that are really basic. They're like ants. They walk to a temple every day, and then they walk back to their house, and along the way, they'll stop here and they'll stop there. But if you just do that for every little character, if you've got 700,000 of them, you kind of got how a city works, right? In a very basic sense. I guess I like to say, if you flew a helicopter over Los Angeles or Melbourne and just observed people, most days they're doing kind of the same thing. They're just getting in their car, going to work, getting out of the car, getting into the car, and it's, there's more complexity to it. But
Tom, my life has more meaning than that.
I guess that's how just by simple animation routines, it's interesting how you can start to approach what a day in medieval time is. But all of this is, it's very hypothetical. I think I probably, that's in the building of things, it's a lot of, how we do it is a lot of separate little models, tiny little things like baskets or pottery. And I have students working on summer projects, and this goes, it just adds and it adds and it adds to a library of things, which we then get to enrich our scenes with. So it's mostly the everyday things I focus on, because that is 99% of the city. So what the houses look like, what the vegetable gardens would look like, what the wooden fences would look like. They're really quite boring stuff. And the temples, which are beautiful and elaborate and complex, we're still going to get to them later. They're almost too much to do at the moment, but we will come to them. Yeah. So it's kind of prioritizing of things. You start with the mundane things, and then you have the city, and then you can work further on the very detailed parts. Yeah, it can come later.
And I think I'll try to concisely answer this really profound question, which is about kind of bringing students in to kind of the complexity of any type of representation of the past, right? For the teaching module that I had linked to, like, we bring students through these different case studies, and then kind of we'll look at textual case studies first, because that's what I'm trained in. So we were looking at like 1296, Chinese emissary to Angkor by Zhao de Guan, and kind of we do close analysis of those words. And then that was what was featured in some of the visuals, so that was placed within Virtual Angkor. And then we were also looking at like a French colonial 1901 travel log to that. And then I've had students, and then we go through Virtual Angkor, and then we go through the experience, and usually our students are like, oh my gosh, look at the elephants, and then like the tree, like students are really excited, and then often it's usually like I ask those questions, and then like, what are you like confused by, or what do you want to learn more about? And then that's when like I think the learning is really happening, when they're like, wait, like where are the children, or like gendering is happening too. Like, where are the women? Are they women? Like, it's like there's like that's a gender question for Tom too in terms of representation of women. Like how is this? And then we catch moments of students' kind of presumptions of how a woman or man looks like, or how a child, or what they should be doing, and how they're behaving, things like that. I've had some students also recall that they themselves had gone to Angkor Wat somewhat recently, part of a tour package or something, and they had photographs, and then they were kind of layering what they had photographed at that time compared to what they observed through Virtual Angkor, and just having like a reflexive moment of like participating as a tourist, and if in fact we were re-participating as tourists through these virtual experiences of the past, like there was like this like sacred profane moment of like, what are we doing here? So I mean, there's kind of no right or wrong answer, but I open up the Pandora's box of all those types of questions. Yeah.
I guess, on the how people are represented, we're still working on it, and we still haven't got, so you've got 750,000 people. A lot of them are going to be kids just tearing around, especially, just gangs of kids running around all over the place. We haven't animated them yet. It's too hard to do. We're getting onto it. So at the moment, it is actually, because everything is kind of incomplete, but at the moment, it's a city. There are some women holding babies, and there are some kids sitting around playing, but they're quite rare, so it's not really accurate yet. And I guess the other thing about Angkor is that everyone, and this is well attested in the bas reliefs, and also from eyewitness accounts, that everyone goes naked to the waist, men and women. So they have slightly different, the ways they tie their clothes are different. You can identify men and women at a distance, but that, you're being honest to the historical record, but you've got to be, we've got to be careful, how much, I guess it's like 19th century Bali. There's a lot of pictures of Bali there too. The women were dressed the same way, and the men too. But we've got to be careful of how much we show. We often show people in aggregate, in crowds. So we're not really into showing people very close up. So, and this is, part of it is consideration for how this could be used in high school textbooks, and also in Cambodia.
Should we open to a question?
Yeah, we could open it up, or we have follow-up questions, whichever, if there's questions from the audience. I know we're running low on time.
Thank you so much for sharing fantastic project. And it really makes me think about sort of lots of research systems, ideas about cultural tourism or touristic reading, right, of historical texts. And one of the ways that I often approach this is thinking about, when you go in to look at a photograph, and like sort of example, like if you're at the Eiffel Tower and you sort of try and capture it without all the people, the swarms of people around, right? So you capture with just the Eiffel Tower, or if I think of like hiking in Southern California, you try and capture the view without the telephone lines. You're right. And then there's this way that's frequently that I thought about for multiple projects where we sort of erase people. And so I'm so appreciative, right? And you erase like evidence of people, right? No telephone lines, no crowds. And you guys, putting the people in, I understand is so difficult, but I just think that's so key, right? To have the people and to have the briefing. But I'm wondering, as you're doing that, and you talked about putting in like the fences and things that are simpler, do you think about things like trash? Right? Right, you're paying such attention to detail. Have there been things where you've decided, like we're not gonna have trash? Because like human beings, that's very much like part of human beings, right? There's gonna be refuse of some sort.
That's really interesting. We've done a lot of work with that. It is hard to do when we try just making sure that there's scatters of leaves around the edges of the road, and that marketplaces in particular have kind of that there is definitely trash and piled up stuff around. And it's also really interesting to think of, you probably heard people sweeping in there, that often sacred spaces were kept extremely well tended, so there were people running around sweeping them as well. So yeah, that's an important consideration. I would say that a lot of virtual heritage environments look clinically clean. That's a problem, because when you make things in 3D, it's the first time you make it, it's perfect. You have to, so adding trash and just, I guess, piles of stuff that makes up the archaeological record, it's really important to make it look messy and lived in. Yeah, and there's an authenticity in that, and the references we use are a lot of photographic references, how a village looked, and where things would be piled up and where they would be stored, and how the houses often were in a slight state of disrepair. These are really important details to get right, but it takes a lot of time to edit those in as 3D modelers. We have to keep going back, and it's much easier and quicker to make things that are perfect, for sure. Yeah.
Curtis.
Tom, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So you mentioned in passing that some of the houses were procedurally generated. And so now I'm curious, just sort of roughly speaking, how much of Virtual Angkor is handcrafted, given sort of detailed historical sources, and then how much of it is procedurally generated, given a sort of general understanding of the area and what went on there? Or where things might have been?
Yeah, very, very good question. Very good. So at the moment, like we've got, say those thatched houses that almost all the people at Angkor lives in. We've probably got, we maybe model about 8 of them, very quite distinct forms and styles, and collections of rooms and how many side roofs they've got, how many windows, how many supporting stilts, and all of this is on photographic evidence. And then we take those 8 models, and they're modular, so they have different parts, and we can mix them up very quickly to give us 24 models, and then we can take those 24 and turn them into 48 models, and then we kind of stop. So it's procedurally generated that we have 48 different thatched houses, but if we're going to make a model of the city, we scatter them around so that they never repeat in front of you, So it's a little bit of a trick where we're using a limited range of houses, but nobody ever notices. If you fly over, it's very, very hard to tell. Oh yes, that's house 40. That's house number 45. I saw that a few minutes ago. You never tell. So the people, they're pretty unique, but we just multiply them by thousands and thousands. And then there's things like trees and stuff, which we probably, there's about 20 or maybe 30 trees and plants that make up the whole city. So when we scatter them out over the map, they're procedural in the sense that, we generate rules about where they appear, and they repeat many times, but we're working with quite a limited set of models. And that's for good reason, because otherwise, the more models you have, the slower the computer is. So the less models you have, the quicker it all works. So yeah, in answer to your question, it's partly procedural, but it's using a library of quite highly researched base models. Yeah.
All right. I think we will leave it there and probably have some time for demos. And thank you all so much. And thank you to Tom and Cindy.